Hello and welcome to another podcast episode of Anthony's Animation Talk, and today we have a treat for you. Today we've got voice actor, comedian, impressionist, and animation historian Keith Scott. Welcome, Keith.
Hi, Anthony. It's great to be here, and I enjoy your work, and I'm very much looking forward to talking about the classic cartoon era. Greetings, culture fans. Great to be here.
Wow, you certainly know all the big stars of the cartoon era, of course. But thank you very much for being here, and thank you very much for being in the same time zone as me, because that's always the big thing when having a chat with...
When most of this happens in the continental US.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, it's not too bad. You know, it's pretty much my morning, their afternoon, so it's not too bad. But then I've got a friend in the Netherlands, and it's like even worse. It's like only a few hours early morning, few hours late at night. That's it.
That's right. Yep. That's even a different zone, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. But today's going to be a nice casual chat, and we're going to go through a few questions. A few of my friends will ask a few questions as well, so...
Right.
Yeah, it's all about having fun today. That's what
Absolutely.
This is all about. So, I mean, firstly, I wanted to start off with just some of your voice acting and impersonations career. I mean, when did you realize that you had a gift for impersonations?
I think I was about 12, just going into high school, and I'd been, like the previous 6 years, the biggest J. Ward TV Hanna-Barbera cartoon fan, so I'd been starting to practice how to do these voices, even before my voice changed. It really was cartoon characters that were my first impersonation. The very first one I ever did was, if you remember, Mr. Jinx from the old Huckleberry Hound show.
You know? Oh, yes.
Yeah. That was one that, like, I would like to, clobber the miserable nieces to pieces, like...
You know, and I was doing all these characters for the. I mean, every kid at school did that, you know, but I seemed to have like a knack to try to make it as authentic as I possibly could. So it just kind of grew from there, you know.
Yeah, you know, I mean, I know for my kids, they like me to try and impersonate them, but it's like, nah, I'm not particularly great at it. But
to get it really authentic, of course, like all these modern day voice matches, it really is like hundreds of hours of study to get paid to impersonate something that, you know, the original voice artist is now long gone, just through old age or whatever. It's to get it as accurate as possible. It sometimes takes ages.
Well, I can imagine. You know, in my case, I just a spur of the moment thing for the kids. I just try and do something, but then I realize, this will take a while. This will definitely take a while for sure. But how do you approach a fresh impersonation of someone you've never tried before? So, for example, let's just say I become a celebrity and you got to impersonate me for whatever crazy reason. How would you approach it? What would you do?
Well, I've been doing this for 40 years. I'm one of the old guys. So my method is the way I used to do it before today's technology, which was first of all on tape and then later on CDs. I never liked being distracted by the visual because the voice thing was, to me, something you had to really concentrate on. So I always made an audio recording only and played it back with headphones and where I could hear myself and mix and match. Some of the voices came really easily if they were distinctive people like Donald Trump, because so many people were doing him. He was larger than life, and they're the people you look for, you know? So, you know, he had that kind of voice like that, you know? And so he was an easy one, but sometimes you get maybe a political character that's very flat and bland, and that takes a lot longer because then you've got to really maybe pick up on expressions that they use, even if they've got a boring voice. But I always, you know, was very attracted, especially with the actors, to those sort of voices that were just instantly recognizable, like the late Alan Rickman, you know, when he was Severus Snape in the Harry Potter films.
Oh, yes.
Turn to page 394.
You know, that resonance.
Yeah.
Then sometimes you take a voice like that and then you exaggerate it slightly and it becomes like an original cartoon voice.
Wow.
So many of those guys in the early days, like Doris Butler and all of them, took an impersonation they used to do as young vaudeville people and really exaggerated them into a famous cartoon character like Yogi Bear or whatever.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. So when you say someone boring, so for example, like a few years ago in Australian politics, we had opposition leader Bill Shorten. So would you class that as someone with a boring voice? Or?
Yes, he had a boring, flat voice, but fortunately he had a speech impediment you could make fun of where he had trouble pronouncing the letters TH. He'd say, I think it's very much with the problem. You know, so you had that little thing, and then you could exaggerate that. And now the new opposition leader, Anthony Albanese, well, he's got an interesting voice because I think he sounds like he's got a lot of dental problems.
Yeah. That's him to a T right there. Exactly. No, well, that just shows, I guess, even someone really boring, vocally at least, they've got at least something that can, if you listen long enough, you can identify something.
But when I've like for years done stand-up doing impressions, the audiences really just want to hear the fun ones, if it's either the cartoon characters or they want to hear those old-time movie stars in the days when they were larger than life. People like John Wayne, one of those classic ones that's become standard vocabulary for a mimic. A lot of today's actors, if you look at the people like Ben Affleck and people like that, they're good actors, but they all have this kind of, very underplayed sort of style like that. Just can't do anything funny with that unless you've got funny dialogue.
Yeah.
And then you'd have to actually make fun of that style of acting, which is so underplayed, it's almost catatonic.
Yeah, I have noticed that. And I've noticed that it's even sort of extended somewhat into animated films, modern animated films, where they seem to always want to cast celebrities just for the name value, but then when you listen to the voices, they're boring. Like there's
if they're a comic celebrity, it works well, like Eddie Murphy, because he's got the gift of comedy. But sometimes when they cast people, like I think it was Brad Pitt in Treasure Planet and things like that, it tends to be a bit forgettable, unfortunately for them. Or
I
Bruce
think it was
Willis.
Sinbad, yeah. But
Sinbad was it? Yeah.
Yeah, but the same point anyway. That it's like, sure, big name, but it doesn't really matter whether it's him or sounded like. It just doesn't make sense to me.
It still comes across a bit flat for the medium of animation, which I guess like you, I hark back to the great classic era of animation, which was, from the beginning of sound up until, say, the early 60s. And everything then was, if the animation and everything about a fast-paced, zany cartoon is larger than life, that's why I always think the voices had to be larger than life too, and broad. So anything done by Mel Blanc or the voice of Popeye, Jack Mercer, or people like that, they were just absolutely perfect for the actual medium of cartoons, which is, if it's exaggerated in every other aspect, it certainly should be vocally.
For sure. I mean, I think for me, this is just off memory. There's probably other examples, but the last time I really enjoyed an actual vocal performance in modern film was actually in Toy Story, how you had Tim Allen and Tom Hanks.
Yes.
They have these distinctive voices, at least. At least that's how I felt.
Yeah, even there, yes, distinctive voices, and both had comedy experience. I mean, everyone forgets that Tom Hanks really spent maybe his first few years doing stand-up. Certainly Tim Allen, before he got the Home Improvement series. But then Toy Story was also very clever because the dialogue was interesting. It wasn't just that superhero stuff, where in the serious cartoons, like the action-type ones, or maybe in modern video games, so much of it is just that, I'm going to destroy you. And variations of that. You think about that new DC movie, the Zack Snyder one. They all had villains in every one of them. And all of that is, these days, is that modern breathing into a microphone technique that TV promo voices have.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I enjoyed the film, but I could definitely hear that that whole vocal thing. It's like, it sounds like pretty much everyone else. So,
that's what I meant by that. I just meant that has now become its own cliche, and it's almost like, oh God, not another one. It's time to move on.
Absolutely. With Bullwinkle, now I know you've written a book about all this, but just briefly, just for people who may not, of course, know who you are, they're learning about you for the first time here. I mean, how did you end up becoming the voice of Bullwinkle?
Well, of course, I'd been the biggest fan of Jay Ward's cartoons since I was like 6 years of age, and ended up writing to all of the voice people like Bill Scott, who was the co-producer and writer. And I met him in 1973 when I won a trip to Hollywood, and he'd already had letters from me. And he ended up saying, one day you're going to write a book about this. And of course, at that age, I think I was just 19. And of course, you don't believe things when people say that.
Of course.
It was 30 years later that it came true. But those people, when they finally either retired or passed away, had mentioned me to the daughter of Jay Ward. And it was just in, I think in 91, where Universal had the rights to all of the Jay Ward cartoons at that time. And there was a hint that they were going to do new stuff. And I was coming over because I'd already sent them a letter about writing a book and getting permission from the family, about Jay Ward. And so again, they became aware of me and said, well, why don't you do a demo tape? So so because I was coming to Los Angeles, I put down that quick demo tape I sent you a copy of the Jay Ward voices, and gave one. This is so long ago. It's back in the days of cassettes, would you believe? But I gave a copy to June Foray, who I'd known for several years. She was the only surviving voice from the old guard who was still with us. And I had no idea. Apparently she found my impressions of the Jay Ward characters so accurate. I had no idea. I just did as best as I could. That she went home that night from the restaurant and called her agent, who was Don Pitts, who looked after Paul Frees and Mel Blanc and all these people, and played it to him over the phone. And by sheer coincidence, I was staying at the Holiday Inn on Hollywood Boulevard, right opposite his office. And I got a call from him that morning at breakfast, and he said, "I'm Don Pitts, and I represent June Foray, and I'd like to represent you for any work here in Los Angeles." And so it was like in 24 hours, I had an American agent, thanks to June Foray. And he'd already sent a copy of the cassette to Jay Ward's daughter. And so she called me and said, "I'd like you to be our official voices, but we won't be ready to do anything until early 1992. And she was as good as her word. The first job I ever had was working with June Foray and Corey Burton doing the narrator voice. And it was back in Hollywood, I went to do this soundtrack for the Universal theme park, where they had all the costumed characters, up on stage. And so I got to do Bullwinkle J-Moose.
And I got to do Dudley Do-Right of the Mounties.
And I did, and Border's Bad Enough. So that became a 20-year career going back and forth to LA and often doing commercials in Sydney. By the technology of the time was ISDN, where they could hook you up to a studio around the world and it sounded like you were in the same room as them. That was pretty good before the today's digital age. That was pretty good technology. So I got to do a lot of commercials doing those characters, Bullwinkle and so on, working with Frank Welker and June Foray and all of these people in LA and sounding like I'm in the same room. So that's a very long answer to your question about how I got to be Bullwinkle.
That's fine. No, that's completely fine. As a kid growing up, I loved watching Blinky Bill. Bill.
Oh, yeah.
Well, and of course you were involved in that.
Was right, because most of my career transpired here in Sydney, of course. I started in the 70s, and by the early 80s, I'd built up a pretty good reputation doing all these anonymous character voices in the industry. I mean, it was still like voiceover is essentially anonymous. You sometimes you don't want the publicity in that field because you just want to keep getting work through people who are in the industry, and one job tends to lead to another. So I was really busy back then. And so the Blinky Bill actually really started with Yoram Gross, who was the producer here, calling my agent really to do, I think it was about 6 years before Blinky Bill, the last 5 Dot movies. Dot and the Kangaroo was the first one he ever did before I met him. And so I did the Dot and the Whale and, Dot and the Smugglers and all of these. And then finally he was ready to go into TV in 1990 and was talking about, licensing the old Blinky Bill literary property and making a cartoon series. Well, it ended up so successful, they ended up doing 3 series of 26 eps each. And it was just great fun to work on.
Yeah, because it was more the TV series I grew up with, because it came around the time I was in primary school. So,
right.
No, it was definitely a lot of fun. I mean, what would you say are the differences between working on a production in Australia versus one in LA? Are there any major differences there? Or is it about the same?
I think lower budgets, one thing. And of course, it was pretty easy with Yoram Gross. I think I was lucky enough that in this country, it wasn't a big industry like it was in Hollywood and had been for decades. So I was, in those days, with him, I ended up doing not only Blinky Bill, but other series like Tabaluga and Skippy Adventures in Bushtown and Flipper and Lopaka. I don't know if you saw any of these, but I felt like Australia's babysitter for a whole generation. In fact, it's now 2 generations who've said I grew up listening to all these voices. So I feel like a grand old Gandalf the Grey sort of person.
Yeah.
But, it was easy because you didn't have to audition. Once you did a job he liked, and he liked what I did on Dot and the Whale, all just a whole slew of crazy voice bit characters and things. So he just was one of those producers who believed in the old loyalty thing, where today you have to audition for every job, and you're auditioning against maybe 100 other people I sometimes wonder how a decision is finally reached with a group of people listening to 100 different voice auditions. But in those days, it was just a call, Well, we're doing another series and you'll be doing about 7 characters. And so it was that easy back then,
Wow. Wish it was that easy these days. I'm sure a lot of people wish.
It's a different world. Yeah, it's a different world. Ever since, I think, the invention of the internet and cable at the same time and all of this, everything is now so much bigger. And in every aspect, it's so much more fiddly and so many more paths to take before you finally get a call.
Yeah, for sure. Now, before we get into the questions regarding Keith as an animation historian, take a listen to his J. Ward Voices demo.
Hello out there, scullery maids. Today's subject is how to get into the movies without buying a ticket.
Is Get Crashing Moose again.
Hello there, Mr. Theatre Manager.
I never knew you saw a movie before.
At the close of the 19th century, Canada was overrun with Canadians and smugglers. Dudley loved Nell. Unfortunately, she loved his horse.
But Nell, why won't you marry me?
The Mountie post was under the command of Inspector Fenwick, Nell's father.
Send Constable Do-Right in here and tell him to hurry.
You sent for me, sir?
Yes, I did, Dudley. Snidely Whiplash is about to expose his evil plan.
Let's send Nell, Inspector.
Once upon a time, there was a little girl called Red Riding Hood because she was, that's why.
Ah, this'll teach you to sit on my sundial.
Hello there. Today's poem is called...
Hey, Moose, how come you always get to read poetry?
Well, it's my part of the show.
You think you are the only one with soul?
Hello out there. Peabody here. Standing by the Wayback Machine is my pet boy, Sherman. The ever-reliable Wayback Machine transported Sherman and me instantly.
Cotton-picking wolves. Cotton-picking friendly wolves.
We'd love to help you out, Rocky, considering we just landed from the moon. Well, that's right, Kidney, but I forgot my Scrooge gun.
Ah, there, Rocky and Bullwinkle, Captain Peter Wrongway Peach Fuzz at the helm.
Yeah, that's right, Whiplash. It's Dudley Do-Right disguised as a redwood tree.
Rapunzel, let down your hair so that I may climb the golden stair. Wow!
Calling Boris Badenoff. Come in, Boris. The coast is clear.
Come in. I am in, fearless leader, but tape is over.
Well, I guess that's it. Time to say goodbye, Mr. Peabody.
I never say goodbye, Bullwinkle. Arrivederci.
Wise guy.
And until next time with our heroes in frightful danger, watch for the next episode, Avalanche is better than none, or Snow's your old man.
Now, another part of what you do is, of course, animation research, which all of us, I know, myself and my friends included, we love reading about the stuff that you've written. But what I was curious about is what actually led you into animation and voice actor research? Like, what was the genesis of all that?
Well, it was. I've been doing that really ever since I was the same age as becoming interested in voices. One kind of fed the other. As I say, my love of early Hanna-Barbera and J. Ward cartoons meant that in high school I wrote, because everyone was still alive back then, Doris Butler, who was Huckleberry Hound and Yogi Bear and Snagglepuss and all these voices, and Bill Scott, the voice of Bullwinkle and all them, June Foray and Paul Frees. I got tapes from these people. It's quite possible that myself and Corey Burton in LA were the first generation of people who wrote to these guys, and they could see that there was a new generation coming up who would, end up replacing them. So it was all just being in the right place at the right time, I guess. I was doing research. I used to go into libraries here in Sydney and look up old issues of trade publications like Variety from Los Angeles and get all these facts and figures about the cartoons. And I sent a whole filmography of the J. Ward titles to Bill Scott in one of these letters. I was still in high school. And that's when he said, your records of our stuff are better than what we've got in our files. So I kind of was just fascinated. But then, you see, I've always been fascinated with the history of Hollywood itself and the movies and early TV, silent films, the whole thing. So it's just like my hobby feeds my work and vice versa. So I'm very lucky in that respect that I've been able to do both fields. I remember when I first came out with the book, in fact, it hadn't even been published yet, the Moose That Roared book, The History of J. Ward Productions. And Jerry Beck's comment made me laugh. He said, "This is weird." He said, "Because you're a voice person, and you're writing this history. He said it's sort of the same as if Dawes Butler had written the history of Hanna-Barbera cartoons. Which really amused me,
Yeah, for sure. I mean, what would you say is the most interesting fact that you discovered in your animation research? And I know that's kind of broad, but I guess maybe
it's broad, but
what stuck out
I've
most?
focused, because so many books have been published on, say, Disney, and there's been a lot of animation research done by other great researchers even before I started. I'm, again, marrying what I did for a living. I was intensely interested in the fact that for the first 30 years of short cartoons in theaters, the voice artists did not get credited. And nobody knew who did all of the characters in the 1930s. Mel Blanc had an agent who got him screen billing in the 40s. He was really unique for about 10 years. And so one of my pet interests has been this history of the hundreds of actors and comedians who did, funny little voices in maybe 1 or 5 cartoons, and discovering who they were. And I'm still finishing up a book-length study of that subject. So I'd say if the most interesting facts I discovered in that voice research were, I can pat myself on the back a little immodestly and say that I was the person who discovered who did Tex Avery's Screwy Squirrel, which was a radio actor named Wally Mayer, just from finally hearing that voice on a radio comedy show in 1944, and then doing a mix and a mat and doing a bit of research and finding out what other shows he'd been in. And then the other one was the famous singing frog in One Froggy Evening. And when I started doing archival research at Warner Brothers at the University of Southern California, and they had these little file cards, and it just said for that one, it had this Harry William Roberts, who was a singer known as Bill Roberts, but I didn't know that at the time. It just said the cartoon was called It Hopped One Night, and that made me think, I wonder if that was a working title for One Froggy Evening. So in those days, before the internet, I made an international phone call to my friend Mark Kausler, who you've no doubt heard of.
Oh, yeah.
And he had production numbers, and on this little file card, there was a production number, and I said, that's it. It's One Froggy Evening. And because Chuck Jones had said over many years to me, I just can't remember the guy's name. I can see his face in my mind, but I can't remember what his name was. And even his daughter said, no, we've never been able to work out who the singing frog was. So they're my little tiny claims to immortality. And, sometimes I think, gee, there's only maybe 10 people on the whole planet who'd even care about this. I think there's a few more, because I've been told that, there's a lot of people who can't wait until I finish this darn book about the history of voices.
Oh, myself included. Included. Definitely. I mean, was there anything that you found that just completely debunked something that was accepted as truth for the longest time in animation history?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there was, well, of course, people like Mel Blanc and Chuck Jones started doing talk show anecdotes about their years before the age of the internet. And, of course, people used to accept a lot of their sort of publicity, sort of talk show stories as truth, but a lot of it was exaggerated and just not true. They were more sort of just to entertain an audience. So I debunked a few things in their memories, but there was a lot of stuff in books too. The Paul Frees was the voice of the Fox and Crow at Columbia, and I knew it wasn't his voice. I knew it just from when I was a kid. I knew Paul Frees. So again, I did some research and found out that there was an actor named Frank Graham who did those voices at Columbia, and he was also the guy who did the wolf for Tex Avery back in the 40s at MGM. Very, very good, beautiful voice. A man of 1,000 voices, but not a funny voice actor like Mel Blanc, although he could do funny voices. He was known as a man of 1,000 voices in dramatic shows where he'd do, like if it was a Western, he'd play all the cowboys and the villains and all that, and they all sounded so different from each other, you'd swear it was 5 different actors, So anyway, when Mel Blanc got signed to Warner Brothers in 1941 exclusively, he was not allowed to do voices for competing studios. So Frank Graham became one of the top people in animation in the 40s. And Avery once said that he was a very classy actor and very easy to direct. And he unfortunately had a bad love affair and committed suicide in the year 1950. Otherwise, we would have heard a lot more about him.
Oh, wow. Didn't know that. Yeah. I mean, I know. Yeah. Knew of Frank Graham, but wow, I honestly didn't know that.
Yeah, in fact, I think he had that real resonant sort of narration voice, like the mid-40s ones, like The Shooting of Dan Magoo. That's him. The Shooting of Dan Magoo. That sort of voice. And he was really replaced after he killed himself. Paul Frees became the guy who kind of replaced him in Tex Avery's cartoons as one of those sonorous narrator voices.
Oh, for sure. For sure. I mean, I think Paul Frees is just, the more I hear his voice, it's just amazing.
Yes, he was one of my childhood favorites. He was one of the people who really inspired me to do voices, and of course, finally meeting him, it was like meeting one of your childhood heroes, you know. But he was the one who sent me a tape from his home studio in the days of reel-to-reel tape. He put on his narrator voice right at the beginning, and it was like, to my good friend Keith Scott in Sydney, Australia. And, you know, here I was, an 18-year-old kid hearing this. It was like,
wow.
Like the voice of doom, you know.
Wow.
And then, of course, he just went into his own normal voice after that, you know. So I've really, when you think about it, that was in 72. So I've had, I guess, half a century of knowing a lot of these people and keeping up the interest in them up until this day. I'm still fascinated by any old Walter Lantz cartoon that I hear that has got a new voice in it. So there's another one I've got to research.
Yeah.
So it's an endless study. Well, one reason it's endless is, of course, the fact that they were not credited means that there was very little paperwork kept about who did the voice acting in those days. I lucked out with some of the Warner Brothers stuff. I got about 8 years worth of special records of that because I discovered that in the music department files, they used to keep daily recording logs of everything that was recorded at Warner Brothers, including the cartoons. And they had the names of a lot of unbilled actors and the fee that they made and the day that they did it. And the one thing that fascinated me about that more than anything is that over that 8-year period in the 1940s, almost all the cartoons were recorded after the storyboard, like the dialogue was recorded, about up to sometimes between 1 and 2 years before the cartoon was finally released to theaters, which is, I used to think it was like 6 months or something, you know?
Yeah, that's what I thought. Oh, that's... Really,
that's why Kent Rogers ended up in the very last Beaky Buzzard cartoon that he did in 1945, and he'd already died a year earlier. You know, in World War II training, he had an accident and died. And unfortunately, again, Bob Clampett once said, had Kent Rogers lived, he would have been a very important voice actor because he was, as you know, I think he was 19 years of age when he did all those great impersonations in Hollywood Steps Out.
Yeah, I was actually became fascinated by him actually as I was doing my commentary series. You know, I didn't know in Super Rabbit he did that whole greatest experiments that.
Yes, which was based on a comic called Richard Haydn. Well, of course, he was done later by Shep Menken in the Clyde Crash Cup voice for the Alvin and Chipmunks show. So several people did that voice. But, you know, you did it quite well just then.
Oh, thank you. I watched that cartoon many times as a kid, and I actually always tried to impersonate that one.
Super Rabbit, yeah. Of course, in the same year, he did that same character in Tex Avery's Who Killed Who at MGM.
Yeah.
I'm the hero. And then, of course, he gets shot.
Of course. So I wrote a question here, you know, any interesting people you've met in your animation research journey? You've already, of course, discussed a few of them, but anyone else that's, I guess, stood out that you got to meet?
Most of them were the famous ones. I remember meeting Mel Blanc when he came to Australia in 1985 to do the Logie Awards down there in Melbourne, but he was up in Sydney at Triple M. I was doing all this stuff over at Channel 10 then, audience warm-ups for Perfect Match and stuff. The guy there said, you know, you want to meet Mel Blanc, he's going to be at Triple M tomorrow and we'll arrange for you to do something with him. And it was like, could have knocked my socks off, but I was so busy back then, but I couldn't resist going into Triple M, and they had me meet Mel Blanc. He couldn't have been nicer, and I think he could sense I was really interested. So he allowed me to do an impression of Jack Benny, and he did the little Mexican character that he used to do with Jack Benny. And then I did an Elmer Fudd, and he did Bugs Bunny. And the most frustrating thing in my life is nobody knows where the tape of that interview went. It disappeared.
Oh, no.
So it's... I've got 2 nice glossy pictures of myself taken by a professional photographer back then with Mel Blanc on that day at Triple M, but nobody knows where the tape is.
Oh,
but anyway, to answer your question, I know but other interesting people would be some really obscure ones. There was a comic I met who's gone now, but he was named Dave Barry. And for years, again, Chuck Jones couldn't remember who did the floor walker in Bugs Bunny in Hair Conditioned. It was the send-up of the radio character, the great Gildersleeve, but it was even deeper. It was like, come on, little friend. Yes, Rabbit. And finally, on one of those sheets that I found at USC with the Warner Brothers collection, it said Dave Barry. And when I met him, I asked him, and he said he did the Humphrey Bogart voice in Bob Clampett's A Call to Arms.
Ah, yep.
You know that one?
Yep, I know that one. Yep.
Where they did very realistic animation of Bogart and Lauren Bacall.
Yeah.
And so he told me that he was in the army at the time, but he got leave and came in to do that voice, and Bob Clampett played him and Sarah Byrne a piece of film from To Have and Have Not, where Bogart and Bacall did that famous scene where all you got to do is whistle, and they played it over and over until he had the voices down exactly right. There are little moments like that where you get to a background thing that went on with a particular cartoon that nobody else has been told about, you know. And of course, veteran researchers too. I became very good friends with people like Mark Hausler and other ones who are just great animation researchers. I know, you know, Joe Adams, and I loved his book about Tex Avery.
Yep.
Like yourself, I was in high school when that came out, so here's a guy who's even older than me, believe it or not.
Yeah, and I know for me personally, getting to finally meet people that I've long admired, you know, research and all that. I mean, yourself, of course, included, like Jerry Beck and a few others. It's just an incredible feeling. It really is.
It is. It's great. I mean, I was lucky enough, I suppose, as I say, that they were all much younger back then. And I met Jerry Beck and Leonard Maltin when they were still producing book after book. And it was like inspiring to me. I said, right, I definitely want to get published. Both of them and myself were worried about how can you do all of this research from 12,000 miles away. But somehow I managed. Of course, I used to pay for a lot of my own research. I'd pay for trips to LA to go to all of these archives and all of that. So that's what you call a labor of love, because you know you're never going to make that money back.
Exactly.
Even the Rocky and Bullwinkle book sold reasonably well, but it was pretty much a niche market. You know, I think the only books that really sell well are, you know, if you did a tell-all about Michael Jackson's love life or Frank Sinatra or somebody like that, then they sell by the millions. But not when you're looking about a talking moose or the history of voices.
Yeah, well, exactly. But no, it's still a great book nonetheless. Anyway, I certainly enjoyed it. Absolutely.
You mean the Jay Ward one that I did?
Yes.
It's good. I'm glad, because I love it if people... The main thing I love is the fact that they also must have liked the Jay Ward cartoons, because I still think they're some of the wittiest ones ever made.
Yeah, but I'm just trying to remember where I used to watch it, because back on TV before now.
Unfortunately, it was off TV for so many years, and in America too. That's why the movie I did kind of tanked badly, the Rocky and Bullwinkle one. The only successful picture I did over there was when Jay Ward's daughter got me to do the narration for George of the Jungle, the Brendan Fraser movie.
Yep.
Because Disney produced that, and they kind of got the beats right for the Jay Ward feel of it.
It wasn't a bad film.
Even though I personally think the guy directed me a little bit away from the Paul Frees voice, and parts of it ended up sounding a bit more like Gary Owens, you know, from Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In.
Yeah.
Well, of course, Space Ghost.
Well, yes, you know, Space Ghost, you know.
Yes.
Absolutely love that. Now, we all know that, you know, Mel Blanc was, of course, an extraordinary talent, but who else during the golden age of animation do you feel was just simply amazing at the time that you feel that there should be more of appreciation of? I mean, I know for me it's Paul Frees, but any others that...
Yeah, well, Paul Frees. I think Paul Frees has had at least some appreciation over the years because of other things that he did, like his straight narrations and his work at Disneyland and as the voice of the ghost host in the Haunted Mansion. When hinges creak in doorless chambers. You know, that great spooky delivery. But I think from the earlier times, like I said, Kent Rogers, who did such good impersonations and cartoon voices for Walter Lantz and Warner Brothers, and he, for a little while, he was one of the replacement Woody Woodpeckers after Mel Blanc wasn't allowed to do it anymore. Then, as I say, in 1944, he was only like 22, 23, and he got killed in a training accident. So we lost him. But I think another one who was a naturally modest person and very retiring and really took more credit as a cartoon writer was Jack Mercer, who did Popeye, you know, and I think some of the little bit characters he did were also good, but Popeye was so good that it was better than the original Popeye that he was based on. Red Pepper Sam, or whatever his name was, Bill Costello was his name. He was a bit too gruff and down and dirty, whereas Jack Mercer just had an incredible comic ability with that voice, and he could sing and hit notes in that double voice that kills your throat if you do it for too long. I was lucky enough to be asked over to LA to do Popeye for Universal's theme park in Orlando, Florida, the day after I did some Bullwinkle stuff. This is back in 1998, and they got me to do Popeye and the original Bluto, you know, Gus Vicky, who was
you're one of those deep voices like that. What are you doing there?
And and I'd say one of the final ones would be another voice that was similar to him was Billy Bletcher, who did all those great gruff villains in the old Warner Brothers cartoons. And
yes, Billy Bletcher,
Steve Brody, and Bowery Bugs, and the villain in the Riverboat one, Mississippi Hare.
Yeah,
another great talent.
Exactly. I mean, I mentioned with Billy Bletcher on my commentary series. I've always liked. When I noticed him doing other roles that you wouldn't normally think he would do. I believe he was in I Love the Singer, doing
yes, he's the father
accent.
doing the Dutch or whatever it was, Austrian accent. As a matter of fact, he said that when he began as a teenager as a singing waiter in New York, he used to do all these old Austrian and so on vaudeville songs for the customers because he had that incredibly deep bass voice as a very young man, And he was only 5 feet tall, so his billing was the little man with the big voice. And,
that makes sense.
So I would imagine when Avery was doing that, Love to Singer, he just...
So I used to do, just stop that singing.
Yeah.
But I used to find he could also do a high range in his voice that had me fooled for a couple of years. I didn't realize it was him, like in the case of the Stuttering Pig, where he was that villain. He'd hit a couple of those heavy notes.
Like down there.
But otherwise, it was this weird voice that he did, like, I'm that man.
Exactly.
And it was very scary villain, too.
Yeah, it's a great short. One of Tashlin's best. It's amazing.
Yeah, so I love all those early Frank Tashlin films like Porky in the North Woods and all of them. I still love them as much as I did when I was a kid.
Yeah, they're amazing. They're amazing. And I mean, another one I think because I did Tom, Turk, and Daffy. I recorded that one actually last night. He was the turkey, and it's like it just feels weird.
That was the one I think that was had a strange credit. It was written by the staff or something like that.
It was just a weird choice for a voice, but it works so well. It's
absolutely. And I think those guys by the 40s, they knew exactly what they wanted. The only thing that they resented about when Mel Blanc started becoming famous on talk shows is he would sometimes take credit for saying I created this voice, and they'd say really Clampett and Tex Avery and Chuck Jones and all these people would say really Mel would come in as a hired actor every time we wanted him, but we already had the voice fully worked out in our minds. We knew every panel of the storyboard, and really, we gave them. Even Mike Maltese, the writer, said, Mel really, took a little bit too much credit for being the originator. He said he should have just been very happy with what a brilliant interpretive talent he was.
Yeah, because I noticed one story he said was about how he developed the voice of Porky Pig when there was already another actor, Joe Doherty, if I said it right.
That's right.
Yes. He had a natural stutter and...
Well, I mean, he improved on the original. I'm the first one to say that.
Oh,
but really, he based the actual stammer that he did on an actor called Roscoe Aites, who was in early 30s comedies playing a character you couldn't get away with these days with a bad speech impediment that was just the whole reason you laughed at him. Now you'd be hauled up for offending too many people.
Well, that's right. And now, before we get on to the viewer questions, Keith just has to use the restroom. But he brought with him quite a few celebrities who apparently are fans of the channel too. I mean, he even resurrected some of them from the dead, which is unbelievable. I mean, Keith really is a talented guy. So sit back, relax, and let's hear from these other celebrities.
Never done this before. I've been a job producer. I've done a lot of things, but this is something I've never done. There has been no collusion.
Andy came to Shawshank Prison in early 1947 for murdering his wife and the fella she was banging.
Bond, James Bond. Where is Ernst Stavro Blofeld? Ejector seat? You're joking.
I never joke about my work, 007.
12-gauge autoloader? Phased plasma rifle in the 40-watt range? The Uzi 9mm?
When these guys walk out the door with whatever score they're going to take next, they're going to have the surprise of their lives.
Way out west there was this feller. I am not Mr. Lebowski. You're Mr. Lebowski. I am the dude.
It must be terrible, being incontinent, Such a sight as this has not been witnessed for millions of years, since the age of the dinosaurs.
I'll stick with you. You're a mean green fighting machine. Together we'll scare the spit out of anybody that crosses us.
You're only supposed to blow the bloody doors off.
I don't know who you are. I don't know what you want. What I do have are a very particular set of skills.
They're heading in this direction. What are we going to do?
Where are those transmissions you intercepted? What have you done with those plans?
Han Solo. I'm captain of the Millennium Falcon. Chewie here tells me you're looking for passage to the Alderaan system. Myself, the boy, 2 droids, and no questions asked.
Might I just interject one concept at this juncture? You're looking for somebody for this Memorial Day weekend. My blind xylophone player.
A wizard is never late, Frodo Baggins. Nor is he early. He arrives precisely when he means to.
Don't give me that guff. You still got it. You try to hide it, but underneath that cabinet-level veneer, I can see it still smoldering away.
Today's a training day, Officer Hoyt. Show you around, give you a taste of the business, you know.
Turn to page 394. Which one of you can tell me the difference between an animagus and a werewolf?
Let me put it this way, Mr. Amer. The 9000 series is the most reliable computer ever made.
Lawyer's party, big deal. Can't get a beer. I'm going outside, get some smog.
Wow, we even got fictional characters too.
Why don't you talk properly?
I'll try. At this point, there's a few questions that some of my friends actually wanted to ask you. I said, look, I'm going to interview Keith Scott, and one I couldn't quite get the audio of, so I'll do that one first. So it's from my good friend Luke Perkins. He's a teenager actually, and he's got a real great interest in animation history and all that. He's quite knowledgeable actually. Because he basically asks, how do you feel about all these Golden Age cartoons getting all the right attention now after being mistreated and not appreciated enough during the 90s, 2000s, and so on, like with all the restorations
I think
now.
A lot of, it's probably, there was a lack of appreciation in the day. They used to say Laurel and Hardy suffered the same thing, because when something's good and it's there right in the moment, people kind of just take it for granted as, oh, yeah, those guys are funny. Then you look back 70 years later and say, my God, they were geniuses. And there's far more ability these days to appreciate things with everything from all the extra channels that we now have, or YouTube and all of the platforms to see stuff now that we never had before, where everyone who is a young historian can now rerun things instantly over and over and see how something was animated or whatever. None of this ability used to exist. And before the advent of VHS tapes, you often went for years without seeing a cartoon that just was stuck in your memory, and it was like, oh, I guess I'll never see that again, So I just think today it's actually become a lot easier to develop an appreciation for stuff where you can study things in such microscopic detail,
Oh, exactly. Like with all the digital files I've compiled with other friends, of course. We've all banded together trying to get the best possible quality of certain short.
Exactly. And I think it's also great that they are doing all this restoration as we speak. And the other thing that I find great about the young people like Luke and yourself and all of that is that you're appreciating stuff that is almost alien. It's almost like something from another planet, because 80 years have gone by and you're able to see things in context. A lot of people who aren't buffs just think, oh, that old corny stuff, that doesn't even relate anymore, If you take the time to get interested in a topic, you can go off into all sorts of tangents. Even from one cartoon, you can go and listen to radio shows that are related to it, old movies they might be spoofing, and just a little bit of general history of that era that they were made in, and realize what the world was like when the actual creators went to work each day back then. And it becomes this all-absorbing, I've gone into a lot of things so deeply, I've spent years of my life not noticing anything going on around me in the world. Because it can become such an all-consuming research interest.
Sure, but as long as you're having fun in the end, I think that's
absolutely. Yep, absolutely. I mean, there's people who are just as interested in the history of music, and they go into it as microscopically, or even sports people who can remember every cricket score for the last 100 years or whatever. So I'm eccentric, but I'm not the only one.
Yeah, well, exactly. As long as an obsession doesn't hurt you, so to speak, as long as it's you're having fun, I say
absolutely. And I'm having fun, and also trying to do something and put a bit of history back.
Exactly. No, I mean, we're all definitely appreciative of that, 100%.
Right.
Now, the next question is by my good friend. He goes by Fox in a Fix. You may have seen him around.
I've seen that. Yes.
Yeah, he also has helped with me with a lot of great new restorations of cartoons, and trying to compile this thing together. And he's from the Netherlands. he's the person I mentioned that we have trouble sometimes speaking because of all the time zone issues. But no, he's a great guy. One of my earliest followers actually over on YouTube, which is great. But definitely thankful for it. But I'll play his question. He does apologize for his accent.
My question is, what voice do you most regret you never found the original voice actor for?
Yes. Okay, I have an answer for that one. There was a guy who did very distinctive voice in a 1935 called The Country Mouse. It was about a story about going in the boxing ring.
Oh, yes, another one.
Yep, and he also did some other voices around that time that weren't as... the other one he did was the Father Scarecrow for Tex Avery in I'd Love to Take Orders from You. That's a guy that I've never been able to find out who it was. Fres Freeling used him at the time. He even did one Columbia cartoon, which was Mel Blanc's first one over there, and he was in one MGM cartoon, I think, but never found out. He was a guy from the 30s who obviously knew animation producers and all that, but I've just never been able to find out his name, and the search goes on.
Wow, hopefully we can find that
Source
one out.
Of frustration.
Of course, because I think there was another one. I think I even asked you who played the Bing Crosby sound alike in two early Frizz shorts where Bing Crosby apparently got really angry at. Yeah, that one, and there's another one.
And then
Let It Be Me,
I think. Yeah, it's the same guy. Just can't figure out. I've seen some research saying that there was a guy called Billy Paye, P-A-Y-E, who did a Bing Crosby for Schlesinger in a news item. But until it's confirmed that it's that particular cartoon, he's the best that I've got so far. So in my filmographies that I'm making up for the book, anyone who's unconfirmed has a question mark next to the name, but it's an educated guess.
Yeah, which is at least reasonable for sure.
Yeah, at least the search goes on, but trying to be authentic. Cliff Nazaro, who did that great Double Talk character in Penguin Parade, did impressions of Bing and Eddie Cantor too. So sometimes you get people who can do the same voice and they sound similar. Then it's like, in my early days, I'd jump in and say, I've discovered something, and then found out a couple of years later it was wrong. So I'm very loath to do that these days.
Which is fair enough, because I know with my commentary series, because there's so much misinformation out there.
Oh, there is.
Sometimes I'm just so tepid to say something with confidence, even though I've seen it in maybe 3 or 4 different good sites. Let's put it that way, not just IMDb. But
the trouble with IMDb is a lot of people who entered voice credits in IMDb were guessing, and they're often quite wrong. But that's just something I live with.
Yeah, I mean, it's okay as a springboard, I suppose, but not for proper animation research, that's for sure. At least that's what I've found.
Yeah.
But our good friend Austin Kelly, who helps me with a lot of the research on the commentary series, and I'm really thankful for it. He's young, but he's spot on. Kind of what you mentioned before when you were younger and you were researching all these things. He's pretty much similar.
No, I can tell he's an enthusiast. I've seen some of his stuff on Cartoon Research site, Facebook page, and all of that.
Yeah.
And you can tell that he's... also, he was very kind about getting a copy of my Jay Ward book and loving it. So I'm grateful for that.
For sure. Well, here's his question, which I think is actually a pretty good one. I'll just play that back.
Oh, okay.
Hey, Keith. I'm a big fan of what you do. I hope all is well. I wanted to know what you thought of the Hanna-Barbera TV cartoons, because I know you're a big Jay Ward fan, and those were the 2 main studios producing those earliest TV cartoons. I think they're both great, but I wanted your opinions on Hanna-Barbera, since I know you love Jay Ward.
A good question for sure. I loved the early Hanna-Barbera stuff as much as the Jay Ward stuff, because when I was 6 years of age, the first thing I saw was Huckleberry Hound, even before I saw Rough and Ready, along with the old black and white Crusader Rabbit and one called Tom Terrific. They were the 3 that turned me into a cartoon buff at the age of 6. And I loved all the early Hanna-Barbera stuff up until around about just after the Jetsons. And then I started to get the feeling after that they became a bit of a sausage factory, where Peter Potamus and some of those other syndicated ones just didn't have the charisma of the early Huck and Yogi and Mr. Jinx and Quick Draw and all of them. Don't know why. I think it was they ended up becoming a bit repetitious, and I think, of course, they had such success that they had to keep coming up with product after product. But those early ones with Doris Butler and some of those other actors just had a real feel to them. And the funny thing was, years and years ago, when I was like 18, my first boss in the industry was Bill Hanna, when he was living in Sydney for 10 months, setting up the Sydney branch of Hanna-Barbera. He told me, even then, that both he and Joe Barbera, and they were both, slightly different people. They didn't socialize much, but they were partners for 60 years. Both of them always harked back to those first 6 years of the early stuff as their favourites too. There was just something about the feeling of those early cartoons and the look of them, and the fact that they were pretty revolutionary with that made-for-TV style just really was appealing. I think the early Flintstones is great. I love them. I love the Jetsons. I love Top Cat. But really those earliest 4 years of stuff, I think, were their classic period.
What about Johnny Quest? Do you like that one?
I love Johnny Quest as an adventure cartoon because that came along after all those comedy-style ones. And I think, I haven't got the Blu-ray yet, but apparently it's very good. And,
it is, 100%. In fact, with Austin Kelly, he said to me, should I watch it? And he said it to a lot of people, and I said to him, yeah, go check it out. And as soon as he did, he said, oh, these are brilliant. These are brilliant. I said, told you.
Yeah.
Because they're actually really good.
I can remember watching it when I was in early high school, and I haven't seen them since then. But because I got so much into the comedy side of things. But I used to love it, and I always remember there was one line where one of the villains fell into a river and said, but I can't swim, and the other guy said, well, you better learn fast, sonny. For some reason, that line has stuck in my head for 50 years.
Oh, it's a great line. It's a great line. I mean, to me, with early Hanna-Barbera, I kind of liken it to Pixar, what Pixar is today, because when Pixar first started out, a lot of the stuff was just revolutionary. It was just amazing. It didn't come out every year, and it was like an event. It was like there was like a lot more, I guess, soul in those productions.
That's right. And a lot more class, I think.
Yeah, and nowadays, while the films aren't bad, I mean, I love Soul, for example. I thought that was amazing, but it still doesn't feel like an early Pixar film, whereas it's a similar thing with Hanna-Barbera. Like, you might get one or two shows I have a soft spot for. I mean, Josie and the Pussycats, I just got a soft spot for. Don't ask me why. It is terrible. But
sure.
I even bought the Outer Space Blu-ray set. Again, I don't know why. I'm clearly stupid with my money. Just don't tell my wife I bought that.
I am.
But yeah, I sort of liken it like that personally. That's just my opinion, of course.
Yeah.
But
I kind of lost interest once Scooby-Doo came along, but that's just me. That's probably my age group.
Yeah, I watched them all recently in a row. The Blu-ray and
I can't deny the success of them, so obviously I'm in the minority. But mind you, I didn't mind Wacky Races.
Yeah, that was not too bad, especially the voice acting in that one I quite liked.
Yeah, that's right. A lot of it, again, appeals to me with just when they used the old veterans like Mel Blanc and so on.
Exactly. Because Hanna-Barbera, I think, were bought out by this, or taken over by this bigger company. I think that's when it became more dull.
A sausage machine, as Paul Frees once said.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. But regardless, one can't deny that they continue to stay successful throughout the 70s.
Oh, absolutely. I'm the first one. I mean, having Bill Hanna as my first boss was something I never thought would happen. And he, in one sense, was responsible for my career because when I wasn't fired, but it was all seasonal work, and I was just doing cell washing and stuff like that when just starting out to learn anything about the animation business at the age of 18. He gave me a reference. I'd managed to do one little voice for them when they were doing a little promotional thing. And he gave me a reference with his name on it. And that was, so credible, William Hanna in 1972, that it got me an agent straight away. So in some ways, I was lucky with, meeting people at the right place at the right time.
Yeah, for sure. I would have loved to have met him. I probably would have been...
He was a very, very nice man. Very nice.
I would have been silly enough to ask him to do the Tom scream, like from the Tom and Jerry. Yeah, I would have...
No, he talked about that, and but I kick myself now because I didn't have the knowledge I have now. Otherwise, I would have asked him 2 million questions about the old days of harmonizing and the early MGM period before he teamed up with Joe, and just a million things that I can't ask him now.
Of course, yeah, because I think he passed away 2001. I think off memory.
Oh, right.
Something like that. Anyway,
it was. That was when he went. Yeah, that's right.
And now, before we finish the interview, let's hear from some of Keith Scott's other guests.
Hiding out? Marge, you've been reading too many hideout books. Marge, it's not a real kidnapping. It's a simple hoax to win a father's love.
Me. What's up, Doc? I thought I saw a putty Ted. I did tow a putty Ted.
Hello, breakfast.
What I say, what's all the hooping and hollering about, boy?
Why are you looking at me like that, Fun?
I smell the blood of an English wabbit. We must capture a live Earth creature, K9, and take it back to Mars. Isn't that a nice assignment?
Boy, am I a bit bushed.
Meep,
Make the effort to get home a little early, just so we could have dinner sooner so the girls would be finished washing the dishes early.
You came home early because you were hungry, Fred.
Better start with me song. I'm Popeye the Sailor Man. I'm Popeye the Sailor Man. Oh, I'm strong to the finish, 'cause I eats me spinach. I'm Popeye the Sailor Man.
Wow, I can't even believe Popeye actually brought his own band with him. That's pretty cool. And just, I guess to slowly wrap things up, I've got some silly, fun questions that's not animation related. That I'll just run through just for the heck of it. So, starting off with your favorite color.
Favorite color? I watch so many old black and white cartoons. I'll have to say between black and white, so maybe grey.
Grey. Favorite or lucky number?
I'm not a superstitious person, but I always found a couple of times in my life that the old lucky number 7 had worked for me. So I'll say 7.
Your favorite?
I like any number that's younger than I am.
so less than 21, basically. Yeah. Okay. So, favorite animated character? If you could only pick one, I could probably guess it, but. Number one.
I'd say Bugs Bunny without a doubt. I think just a great character with depths to it, and just a great filmography.
And
I like the rabbit, Mac.
I've always loved Bugs' voice. I try to do it, Dak, but I just can't. Yeah, I should practice more.
You're in the right area, but it's just getting the dialect and all of that.
Yeah,
where to place the voice, Mac?
I'm trying to get rid of the Aussiness sometimes when I try and impersonate.
That's been a bugbear with me. Although the funny thing is, I've had Jeff Bergman and a few other guys that I know very well say they can't detect an Australian accent in the voices that I do, which pleases me immensely because it was always in the back of my mind. Oh, I hope the Aussie's not creeping into this,
Yeah, exactly. But your favourite and least favourite movie?
Yeah, but the old movies is what I always hark back to, and I think I used to love the old, film noir, dark sort of films of the post-war era. So I'd say something like Double Indemnity will tie with The Third Man, and my least favourite is the recent Netflix production of Capone. I just thought it was too over the top and had terrible performances, and it just didn't have a crap detector attached to it. I was very disappointed.
Is that the one with Tom Hardy? I'm just trying to.
Yes.
Ah, that one. Well, that's a shame. Yeah, because I like Tom Hardy. So
I love the one from a couple of years before, The Irishman, that Scorsese did.
Yeah, that was pretty good. It's pretty good.
Yeah.
I mean, the de-aging didn't quite work some of the times, but for the most part, it was pretty good. But for the most part, I thought, it was pretty solid.
That's right.
Favorite and least favorite TV shows?
Yeah, well, this will show my age. I still love the original Batman series with Adam West and Burt Ward.
Ah, yeah.
Probably in the later years, I loved Experimenters, so I loved David Lynch's Twin Peaks. My least favorite, I just give you a blanket answer, any reality show. Because I came from an old school, I have simply got no interest in watching non-professionals on television. And it's like, you feel almost like a voyeur, like you put a telescope into your next door neighbor's house, and I'm just not interested.
Yeah, because around the time reality TV picked up, I think it was early 2000s or thereabouts.
With like Big Brother and stuff like that. And
yeah.
I suppose being old school, where I appreciate all this real talent, it just seemed to me that we now live in an age where they're glorifying amateurism, and it just doesn't match with my temperament.
No, that's fair enough, because I noticed I stopped watching free-to-air TV around the time reality TV came on, and I never looked back, really. I only watch it maybe for the footy or whatever.
Yeah, well, fortunately for anyone of your age group and coming up, there are now, as I said, so many other alternatives to free-to-air, and thank goodness.
Yeah, exactly. Your favorite holiday destination, which I know is not the best question to ask right now, being in a pandemic, but
I know.
Overall,
yeah. No, I've been to LA so many times. It's like my home away from home, especially with all the research facilities and all that. And because that's such a big part of my life, I have to say Los Angeles. I know some people don't like the place, but I love it for the whole history of Hollywood that's there and the people that I know.
I have to go there one day. I've actually never been to America before, so I mean, I've been to Japan 5 times, and yet America zero, which is weird. I don't know why, but
well, a lot of the good stuff's now gone, of course, but some of those research facilities at least exist for people like us.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind going in there. I mean, the family, who no doubt will have to come with me, they'll probably be bored out of their mind, but...
Well, as long as they can do something where you go off to do that. If you take them to Disneyland, they'll love that. I'm talking about when the pandemic's finally done.
Of course.
I don't think we'll be traveling really probably until sometime next year, because they've got to get people vaccinated before you're going to be allowed to travel anyway. So it's just been a bit of a killer, the old pandemic, unfortunately.
Now, next one, most famous person you've met and most famous person you'd like to meet. Still living, of course.
The most famous person I met was when I was doing the Rocky and Bullwinkle movie. I was living over there for 5 months because I had to travel with the movie as they made it, doing all the voices. And Robert De Niro's company was producing it, Tribeca, and he played the fearless leader role. And he would be the most famous person I've met and had the chance to talk to and made him laugh and all of this. And it's like, I never thought, that little me from Sydney would meet somebody as accomplished as Robert De Niro and not be disappointed by him. He was very good and very professional. And he didn't like all of that BS side of all the publicity and all of that. So he was just very serious about his work, but a very nice guy. Who I'd like to meet? It'd definitely be one of the character actors like McKellen or Anthony Hopkins. And I keep forgetting about the passage of time. Those guys are really getting up there. Anthony Hopkins couldn't be at the Oscars the other night because I forgot that he was in his late 80s.
Yeah, he's definitely getting on.
The last 21 years since the new millennium, since the year 2000, has just seemed to me to have gone so quickly. I keep harking back to the 20th century with all of my interests, but I cannot believe how quickly the year 2000 up to 2021 has gone.
Yeah, I have to agree with you there. Yeah. It just seemed like yesterday my daughter was 4 years old and we were in Japan in 2017, and now she's going to be 8 in a few weeks.
Wow.
It's like where does the time go? I mean, for goodness sake, soon she'll be in high school.
Especially when you're bringing up kids, like that's the biggest cliche of all. It's like it was just like yesterday they were this young and now they're 21.
Yeah, exactly. And the other day she's asking me can I buy her a new iPad? It's like, what's wrong with mine? What's wrong with mine? But
no, she'll probably before they're asking you to buy them a car.
Yeah, absolutely. And lastly, your favorite phrase or saying?
Oh, that's easy.
That's all, folks.
So yeah, that'll do it for this episode. So Keith, thank you so much for joining me on this episode. I've learned a lot, which I think is important, and I was entertained, which was again important too. But wow, this was a great discussion.
Well, thank you very much, Anthony, and it's been my pleasure. And yours?
Yep. I don't think I'll ever get over that. I'm just talking to Bullwinkle. I don't think I ever will. So I appreciate that. But no.
Well, I could have done a Huckleberry Hound too.
Gotta love that. Unbelievable. So, as always, guys, thank you so much for listening, and until next time, take care.